Okay, in last session we discussed about SSAS, MSBA, and how to install SQL Server data tools, and also the database that we require for our analysis service projects, that is AdventureWorks Data Warehouse, how to download and how to restore to your SQL Server. Now, let's see the next steps. So once you install all these three, you have to make sure that everything is ready to start with your first analysis service project. So let's start with SQL Server and analysis services. How to check whether the SQL Server and analysis services are installed properly or not. And if for that, you need to go to run command and go to services.msc. And once you select services.msc, it will show all the services that are running or that are installed on this particular system. So what you have to do is go here and go to S, where our services will be listed. Our services starts with SQL Server, right? So you can see all the services that I installed yesterday. If you see here, we have a SQL Server installed and SQL Server agent, SQL Server analysis services, and integration services and reporting services. So all the services are installed properly, and you can see the status of each service here. This is a Microsoft SQL Server, which is running fine, and analysis services, which is running, and integration and reporting services, these are on stop mode. These are not running, so I stopped it because I don't need it. I'm gonna work on analysis services, so I just need analysis services and SQL Server for our next 10 to 15 sessions. So how to start the services? You have to just right click and click on start. The services will be started, and if the service is running, then you just need to click on right click and click on stop, or if you want to restart, you can restart it. Now let's try to start the reporting services. When I right click on the reporting services, I don't see the option start. The reason for this one is this service is disabled. So to change to enable the service, you have to go to the properties, and if you see here, it is disabled. So you need to either change it to manual or automatic delay start to start the service. Let me set it to manual and click on OK. And if I go to the service now, I can able to start the service. So remember, when the service is in stop mode and if you are unable to see the start button enabled on the right click of the service, that means it is in disable mode. Let's quickly see what are the different options that are available for service startup. One is automatic delayed start. That means once the system is rebooted, it will not start the service immediately. It will let the windows to come up, and slowly in the background it will start the service, which will not impact the performance of your system. So system start. Now the automatic is like when the system is rebooted, it will start the service along with the Windows OS rebooting. And the third one is manual. So if you set it to manual, then the service will not be started until you come here to the services.msc, or you can use some scripting languages like PowerShell to start the script, but it should be manual. You have to start it on your own, so it won't start automatically. And the fourth one is disable. So if you click on disable and if you select the option disable, then you can't start the service until you enable it by changing the startup type to either automatic delay start or automatic or manual. So these are the different startup types that are available for services. But for now, I'm not gonna deal with integration reporting services for next few sessions. So what I prefer to do is either change the service startup type to either manual or just simply disable it. So if I disable it and if I stop the service, then it will be in disable mode until I enable the same. Let me do the same for it. I'm stopping the service and changing the startup type to disable for now. So when we start discussing about our reporting services, we can come back and enable the reporting services and start the reporting services, and similarly we can do the same for integration services. So now for our analysis services projects, we need two services minimum to be running. The first one is SQL Server, because this is the place where we will be where we will be having our data warehouse database. And analysis services, this is the server where we will be deploying our projects, our analysis service projects. So these two services are running fine. We are good with the services side. Now let's see the next one. The next one is database, the adventure database, which we restored in last session. So for that, you need to connect to the SQL Server and check whether the database is restored properly or not. To do the same, either you can go and search for the SQL Server Management Studio here. Here it is. Either you can do it in this way, or you can use the shortcut like by using the run command. You can start the service. Let me show you that one too. So if you go to run and SSMS, we'll go on, pick the SQL Server Management Studio. Now this is the database engine, and using this management studio you can connect to database engine, that is our SQL Server, analysis services engine, that is our analysis services databases, and report in the same way reporting and integration services. But you have to make sure that the service is running. If the service is not running, let's say for example, let me go to the services again. Oops, sorry. Let me go to the services again, and let me go to the SQL Server. I just stopped the service. Now let me go back to this and database engine, and I'm trying to connect to this one. Let me go with Windows authentication. So it will try to connect and it will check whether there is any service running on the server name Moksha. Any SQL server is running on this server Moksha, and as I stop the service, it will throw a message saying that the service is not running or can't find the server. Can you check whether the service is running or not? Like this. Okay, cannot connect to Moksha. Now let me go and start the service. Okay, now let me connect to the server, and it is connected pretty quickly. Once you connect it, you can see the databases. This is the database which I restored in our last session. But for our analysis services, this is most like application database where you can see a lot of schemas. Like you can see HR. This is denormalized. Sorry, this is normalized data. Normalized in the sense splitting and creating the relationships and removing the redundant data. So it's more like application database. So this will not work best for our analysis service project. So what I have downloaded is like AdventureWorks DW, data warehouse database. So where it is little bit denormalized and marked what is your dimension table and what is your fact table, everything is given here. So I downloaded it from internet in the same page where I showed you to download the other one. Let me quickly show you that. If you go to Google, AdventureWorks data warehouse 2014, and if you go here and if you go to the link, this is what we downloaded yesterday and restored to our SQL Server. Now today I downloaded this one to restore AdventureWorks DW 2014. It's a DW data warehouse ready to use it as a source for our analysis service projects. This is still kind of application database where you need to denormalize a little bit to use it in your analysis service projects. So I downloaded this backup file and I restored, just like I showed you how to restore this particular backup file into our SQL Server database. So the second one, the database is fine. So we are ready to go. with analysis services. The third installation which we did was like SQL Server data tools. So let's quickly check that whether the SQL Server data tools installed properly or not. So for that, go to search and search for SQL Server data tools for Visual Studio 2013. This is the version I installed in my computer. And once the Visual Studio loaded or opened, then you need to go to new and project. Under this project wizard, you need to see these three options: analysis services, integration services, and reporting services. These three are very important for BA projects, and if you don't have these three, then you cannot design and develop. Particularly you can't develop a business intelligence project. So make sure you have this section under the new project. So that is analysis services, integration services, and reporting services. So all the installations are perfect. Everything is set up. We're good to go with our first analysis service project. So before starting with our first analysis service project, let's quickly have a look at OLTP database and OLAP database. We will be using, I'll be using these terms very frequently going forward. So OLTP and OLAP, and what are the differences between OLTP and OLAP databases. And if you see here, OLTP database or relational database or data warehouse or source database for your cube, everything, all these databases are same. Even the application database means the same. Why? Because let me take notepad. So you will have data in your data warehouse, right? So you will pump the data from your application database into the data warehouse, and we will use this, we will design one analysis service project to consume the data and take the structure of this analysis service project and deploy the same into the analysis server as a DB. So this is also a database, and this is the source is also a database. So the difference is the source database, we call it as OLTP, and the destination of analysis service project. So the output of the analysis service project when you deploy to the analysis server is OLAP. So OLTP stands for online transactional processing, whereas OLAP stands for online analytical processing. So the differences are, this is two-dimensional database. That means when you execute, take SQL Server as an example. Let's say our adventure works. If you execute a query called select star from dim product, it will return the result, and the result will have rows and columns. So those are the two dimensions. So it's a two-dimensional one, whereas this is OLAP is multi-dimensional one. You will come to know about this multi-dimensions very shortly. So that is the first difference. And the second one is, here you will maintain and this data is more like transactional data. You can insert, you can update, and you can delete, you can manipulate the data. Whereas this OLAP, 99.9% of the cases, it will be used to retrieve the data. The database, you will execute only select statements, and once the data is retrieved, you will use the data to show in the dashboard. So this is mainly used for analytical purpose. So analyzing how the business is going, how the business is improving, or how the business is going down. So this is more like your application database, where you will be making changes, you will be inserting, you will be updating, you will playing with this. And the third one is, the size of this one is little high compared to this one. So because this is compressed one. So let's say this is 10 terabytes, 1 terabyte. This will be something around 4 terabyte, 400 GB, or something like 3 times better, 3 times compressed at least. So that is one difference. And the fourth one is like, this is this query performance is little slow if you execute a select statement, because the data will be huge in your data warehouse. As this is aggregated, pre-aggregated one, the query performance will be relatively faster in the OLAP databases. And here it is free data, like a leaf level data. You will have data like just like every row will be available here. That is like related to the business. For example, if you have 1 million transactions, all the transactions will be loaded here. Here it is aggregated data. Pre-aggregations will be created. So all this aggregated data will be stored, and this data will be pulled from um, the database whenever it is requested by the user for displaying in the dashboards. And the last one is like this is normalized data. So you'll have joins, tables, and everything. So when you processed it, you will try to denormalize it to the max. When you create an analysis services, it's more like denormalized data. You will try to bring star schema. I'll explain about the star schema in next session. So it's more like denormalized data. We'll try to denormalize as much as possible when you create your analysis service project and deploy that same into the analysis server. So you have to remember one thing here. Whenever I talk about like relational database, or whenever I say data warehouse or application database or OLTP database, all the four are same. All the four are source to our analysis service project. And whenever I talk about cube database, or whenever I say that OLAP database or multidimensional database or analysis service database, all are the same. That is the output, the output of your analysis service project. So remember these two things, because it is very important one. So when you start your analysis service project, you will have this in your hand, and once you finish and deploy and process to the server, you will also get this one into your hand. This will be available to the users so that they can query the data much faster. The querying performance will be pretty good. So in last session, if you remember, I explained what's the use of analysis service projects. The first one is query performance, and the second one is complex calculations can be easily created in analysis service, right? So this we are going to create. So for creating this target database, that OLAP database, we will be designing analysis service project now. So once the project design and development is completed, then we will use the template to deploy and create the OLAP database by pulling the data from the source, that is our OLTP database or data warehouse. In our case, it is AdventureWorks DW 2014 database. Okay, and one more difference between these two is like as this is OLTP, and the data will be pumped continuously, which means it is more like real time. But here, if you there are different storage modes. If you use MOLAP, it is always outdated one. So if you process today, and if you come and watch the and if you come and query the same OLAP database after 10 years, it will be the same data that is available when you process last time. So it is not real time, or you can set it to real time, but when you set it to real time, in this case the performance will be very hit. It is more like if you set it to real time, it's more like executing the query here on the OLAP on the OLTP database. The performance will be pretty poor. It's the trade-off whether you want performance or real-time data in analysis services. If you want real-time data, you have to compromise with performance, or if you want performance, then you have to compromise with real-time data. So this is about OLTP and OLAP. Okay. Now, before starting our first analysis service project, let's quickly see what is the server name in either SQL Server or analysis services, which you will be using very frequently. So if you go to SSMS, and if you want to connect to either SQL Server or analysis services, it will ask you to provide the server name. What is the server name? And the server name is nothing but the computer name where the particular server is installed. For example, the database engine, if I try to connect the database engine, then that means where is the database installed, and what is the name of the computer. So in this case, I'm working on the standalone, that is my system, my own PC. So I don't, there is no other system. So this is nothing but my computer name, Moksha, right? So, but in real time, when you work in the companies, you will be part of a network. Let's say this is one computer, this is one computer, this is one, and all are in network. And people will be using this. Let's say this is used by XYZ, sorry, this is used by A, B, C, and D, different users. And let's assume our SQL Server is installed in your computer and analysis service is installed in your computer. And the computer name of this one is A, this one is B, this one is C, and this one is D. Okay. Now, if you want to connect to the SQL Server, you have, I mean, every system will be installed with your SQL Server Management Studio, because that is your client to connect to the SQL Server or analysis services. What you're seeing on my screen is the Management Studio. That is the minimum thing required to connect to the SQL Server or analysis services. The second thing important, when you have this SQL Server Management Studio installed, then you need to provide the server name. So if you're connecting in this particular example, if you're connecting to a SQL Server, as the SQL Server is installed in the server B or computer name B, you have to provide B as the computer name. And if the analysis services is on C, then when you want to connect to the analysis services, you have to provide the server name as C. And make sure that all the systems are in network. If it is not in network, you can't connect using like this. There will be a complex way to connect, but 99.99% it will be on network. So the server name is nothing but the computer name um, where the particular service is installed. In our case, it's standalone, so everything is in my local. So I'm taking my system name as the server name. So how can I get the system name? So if you go to my computer or this PC and go to the properties, you'll find it somewhere here, computer name. So this is nothing but the server name. So you can get the computer name of your system by doing the same, by going to the my computer, right click on properties, then you'll find this my computer name. So this is about the server name, which we'll be using very frequently. Now, let's start with our first analysis service project. To start with our first analysis service project, we need to start Visual Studio, or we need to start SQL Server Data Tools. So for that, let me go here, Server Data Tools, and I'll be using this very frequently. So I'll be pinning it to the taskbar. And if I go here, I can see this one pinned here. Let me click on this to launch the SQL Server Data Tools. And this is the framework which we will be using to develop analysis services, integration services, and reporting services projects. So this is our framework. Now let me go to File to start a new project, to launch a new project. File, New, Project. And here you can see multiple project types. These are templates. So first one, analysis services, second one, integration, and third one is reporting. For now, our interest is analysis services. So let me select analysis services, and it has 5 different templates. The first one is multidimensional, which we are interested in. And second one is import from server, from a multidimensional server. So this we will be looking in future sessions. And the third one is tabular model, so which we are least bothered about and which is out of scope of these sessions. And import from Power Pivot, like you can design a tabular model in Power Pivot and you can import it from the Power Pivot. And import from server, which is same like import from this server, but this is a multi-dimensional server, whereas this is tabular. So let me explain a little bit about tabular and multi-dimensional to ease your confusions. Okay. So analysis services, it was only multi-dimensional model till 2008 R2, and after that it was split into two. The first one is multi-dimensional mode, not split. It added one more. Microsoft added one more mode of templates to analysis services. One is multidimensional and another one is tabular. Okay, let me take the pen. So the differences, major differences is multidimensional mode is not in memory, whereas tabular mode is in memory model. That means when you process the data or when you create the database of multidimensional template, then the data will be copied to your disk, your hard drive, like C drive, D drive, whatever you specify. It will go and store all the processed data in the disk. Whereas in tabular, it will process to the disk and it will copy to the disk and then it will load into the memory. So all the data of the tabular model project or tabular model will be loaded to the memory so that the performance will be super good. The performance of tabular will be pretty good because it's available. The data will be available in memory and no IO reads. The IO reads will be very less or zero, and the performance will be pretty good. The processing time of this one is relatively higher compared to multidimensional. This is what I heard from Microsoft sessions, and there are some advantages of multidimensional and there are some advantages of tabular. Similarly, disadvantages on both the sides. If you talk about the disadvantages of the tabular, if the database that you are processing is pretty huge, let's say 5 terabyte or 10 terabyte, then you need to have a very good RAM because everything will be stored after compression. Everything will be stored in memory. So you need to have the best memory to load huge databases. So when the database is size is growing like anything, then I don't think tabular is the best one to go ahead with. In that case, I prefer to go with multidimensional model, like 5 terabytes or 10 terabytes of databases you can see in real time. So in that case, tabular is a little uh, not suggestible one. Multidimensional will get a bit, positive votes compared to the tabular in that case. And multidimensional uses only MDX, whereas for querying and for calculations, whereas tabular uses either both MDX and the DAX. So DAX is a new querying language introduced just for tabular model. So you need to know DAX if you want to work with tabular models, and you need to know MDX if you want to work with multidimensional models. So these are a few basic differences between multidimensional and tabular model, but our interest, our sessions will be on multidimensional model. So let's start with our first multidimensional project. So for that I need to select this and give the project name, Adventure Works Data Warehouse is the project name, and this is the place where the solution will be saved. I can show you that. Let me copy that, and this is the solution name. If I click on OK, an empty template will be created. So in the project template, and you can see the solution explorer on top. Now if you go to the run command, if you copy the same the path where the project is supposed to save, you can see the AdventureWorks DW which I have created just now, and it copied. This is the solution name which I have given, like AdventureWorks underscore DW, and a couple of basic files will be created when you create the project. Now once it is done, this is the framework which you will be using for this. You will be working a lot. You'll be using this framework a lot. Couple of quick things which you need to know at this point of time. The first one is these two buttons. This one, Solution Explorer, which is nothing but this one, the Solution Explorer, where you will have all the files and all the objects created will be listed in the Solution Explorer. And the second one is Properties window. So these two you can pin it like this. Pin it means like this, or you can minimize it by clicking this one. So it will be minimized. It's on mouse over, it will expand. Okay, or you can pin it like this. It will be always available on the right. And if it is in closed mode, if you can't see that when you log in, then you need to click this icon to open the Solution Explorer and Properties window. And you will be using these two windows very frequently. And the next thing is you can see some predefined structure here. The structure in the sense like AdventureWorks DW data sources. This is the project name, and this is our database name. This is the folders in it, and you can see data sources, data source views, cubes, dimensions, mining structures, roles, assemblies, and miscellaneous. So if you design anything on the analysis services, it should fit to any one of this folder. You can't go beyond this. This is the fixed template. What you will be using for what, which folder you will be using for what. For all the miscellaneous items like attaching the Power Pivot presentation or some project documents, you can use miscellaneous, and you can use assemblies to add any third-party assemblies or the assemblies that you create here for some particular work. And the roles for providing security, mining structures for cleaning the data before using it in the analysis services, and the dimensions for creating the dimensions, cubes, and data source views, and similarly the data sources. I'll tell you here, if you the minimum things that are required to create one analysis service project is data sources, data source views, cubes, and dimensions. So if you put some valid files or valid objects into these four, that means you designed an analysis service project. So we'll be starting with the data sources, followed by data source views, and then dimensions, and then cubes, and we'll be looking into the roles to set the security in our sessions. Now let's start with the data sources. So if you have experience in designing the application, in developing the applications, like using any programming language, let's say like Java, .NET, or Python, Ruby on Rails. So the most important thing you'll be doing is like setting the connection string. So the connection string is the one which is the core for talking with the application database, either for inserting the data or deleting or selecting or updating or whatever you want to do with the data source. You need to set the connection string first. In our case here, our analysis service project, as I showed you a couple of minutes back, our analysis service project uses the data that is present in the relational database or OLTP database. So under this data source, we will be specifying the connection string that is used to connect to the SQL Server or any underlying data warehouse, from where our project, our analysis service project, will read the data for loading it to the analysis services. So normally we build analysis services database on top of the relational or data warehouse database. In this case, here we'll be specifying what is the connection string to connect to the data warehouse. So in our case, our data warehouse is AdventureWorks GW 2014. So let's create one data source here. So this is the welcome wizard. It will give you a brief about it. A data source does not provide features such as caching, blah, blah, blah. A data source represents a connection to your data. Where you have the data, it will represent the connection to that. Now let me set the connection to that. When you open for first time, it looks something like this. Nothing will be here. So you need to create one. So for that, click on new. And again, the same, you can see a lot of drivers of different providers. Like you can see .NET providers and native OLEDB providers. And you can see for different databases connecting to Oracle, SQL Server, and SQL data provider. A lot of options. And if you don't find the provider that is required for your project, let's say your data is in Greenplum database or some Teradata database, you need to install the driver. And once the driver is installed, it won't show up here. What you need to do is you need to go here and go to services.msc, and you need to restart the server. So once the drivers are installed, you need to restart the server so that the analysis server will pick up the drivers that are available. Okay, remember that. So now the driver that is required for me, or the provider that is required for me, is SQL Server. I'm fine with the SQL Server because I'm connecting to the SQL Server database. And the next option is server name. Server name is nothing but the computer name where my SQL Server is installed and the database is sitting. So that is Moksha, and I can use either Windows authentication or SQL Server authentication. Let me go with Windows authentication here, and this is the database that I'm interested in. Or you can attach the database if you have MDF file. I hope you know the concept of MDF and LDF and NDF files. When you create any SQL Server database or any relational databases, mainly SQL Server I have seen, but I have not seen on other relational databases because I didn't work on those. So when you create a database in SQL Server, two files will be created, MDF and LDF, main data file and log data file. Main data file is the one where it will store all the data, whereas LDF, log data file, is the one where it will store all the transactions. Okay. Once the MDF file is full, you need to set some limit. Once the file is full, then you will create NDF files, so the next data files. So you can use those MDF files or NDF files if you don't have SQL Server installed. You can, and if you have that MDF and LDF files, you can attach those MDF and LDF files instead of using the server database option. Okay. Now I can show you how the MDF and LDF file looks. So for that, go to my computer, program files, Microsoft SQL Server, and SQL Server, and here you'll find MS SQL, and under data you'll have this MDF and LDF files. So you can see for AdventureWorks 2014 there is one MDF and one LDF, and you can see the size of the MDF file. And remember, the LDF file size also grows pretty fast when you do some transactions, like huge transactions like big deletes or big inserts, big updates and all. This is about MDF and LDF files. Now that let me test the connection and see whether the test connection will get succeeded. Yes, it is. Now click on OK. Now we have provided the server name and Windows authentication and the database name. Everything is fine for the data source. Now if you go to the next, you can see something called impersonation information. So this impersonation information will come into picture when you select let me back. When you select Windows authentication here, okay, listen this very carefully because it's very important. So when you select Windows authentication here, and if it is in your local computer, if it is in your computer, the SQL Server is installed in your computer, then it will use the current user credentials. Current user in the sense the person who logged in into the computer. So the current user will be used. What if the server is on some other system, some remote system where it's not in your local, it's somewhere on the other? So you can't use the current system credentials. There is nothing called current who logged in into that computer, right? You can't get that. You are just passing a request to connect to the server. So if it is Windows authentication, and if the server is not in local, if the SQL Server is not in local, then it will take this this impersonation account, the account that you are using to impersonate, and that will be used to connect to the SQL Server and read the data. So if you select username and password here, then this username and password is used to connect to the SQL Server, whether the server is in your local or in your remote. But when you use Windows authentication, then if the SQL Server name that you are providing here is in your local, then it will use that username, the current user who logged into the computer. If the server name is on remote system, then in that case it can't use the current user who logged in your computer to connect to the particular computer. So in that case it will take the help of impersonation. So whatever the account you specify here, it will take the data credentials, like let's say there is a user called test. So this ID will be used to connect to the server and read the data. So that is the major use of impersonation. And this impersonation has 4 different options. Let's discuss one by one in detail. So this is pretty straightforward one. If you see, the first one is Windows username and password. So you need to provide one username and password. Normally we prefer to provide some user who is global, who has a global admin or who has access to all the servers, or so we will provide that ID. and we'll provide the password which never expired, because you should not create mess saying that the password expired when you try to process the database, which is after deploying to the remote server. Let's say you deploy to your analysis service to the remote server, and if you try to process from here, then it won't take the current user, it will take this user, and if the password is expired, then it will say the password is expired. It will not process, saying that it could not make the connection. So that will create mess. So the ID which we will be using here should be like a global ID, which will the password should never expire, or make sure when the password expires you come and change it here. So it should be like at least 1 year it should not expire. The password should not expire. The change of the password should happen only once in a year, or worst case is once in half a year. So this ID will be used for reading the data and all. Now if we use the service account, the analysis services will use one account to start the service and stop the service. It will use that account. Okay. If you go to the properties of the analysis services, it will be there will be one account which will be used to start and stop the services. So that account will be used. And if you use the credentials of the current user, that means instead of providing the username and password, the person who logged in into the computer, his ID and password will be taken if you use the credentials of the current user. And the fourth one is inherit, a little trickier. This inherit is a little tricky one. So this inherit means what is meant by inherit? It is gonna inherit from its parent. So what is its parent? So that this is the data source view. Data source. We are talking about the impersonation of the data source. So the parent of this data source is the database. So let me show you the analysis service database now. Let me go to SQL Server Management Studio, and here I'll be connecting to analysis services, and the server name is same. Click on OK and go to the databases. There is a test database which I created just for demonstration purpose. There is nothing in the test database, and you can see the similar structure, data sources, data source view, and everything is empty. So the parent level, normally admin guys will provide a impersonation at parent level. So the DBA admins who create the databases, DB admins who created the databases, they'll set the impersonation at database level. Okay, if you see this impersonation, it has 4 different options, and let's go back to our impersonation. Okay, let me pick this guy. Oops, sorry. Okay, now this is the impersonation of the data source, and this is the impersonation of the database. So this will be provided normally by the server admins, and this will be by the developer, the one who develops the analysis service projects. Now if you use any of these 3, then you're good. The analysis server will use those particular accounts to connect to the database and read the data, and also to load the drivers and all the stuff related to the data source querying. Okay, if you use inherit, it will try to inherit, it will inherit from the parent's impersonation. You are telling the server, I don't know what is the ID and password which I can use. Try to inherit the password and the ID and password from the database impersonation, which will be given by like the person who controls the database. Let's say your team lead controls the database, and he knows the impersonation account which for the password and the ID which he has to use for impersonation. Then he will provide at this level. Then you will be inheriting the same in the, you don't need to ask the ID and password to your senior, your the person who is controlling the DB. You can just inherit it. Now if you select inherit, and if you then it will come and see the database level, right? Let's say this is test, and this password is given. Then it will use the ID and password which is given here. So if it is inherit, the data source will inherit this ID and password, and it will use the same for connecting to the database and querying the database. If here it is selected as service account, this is same as service account which is here. So it will take the service account, and it will connect to the account which is used to start and stop the services. That account will be taken, and it will connect to the analysis server. It will connect to the SQL Server and fetch the data. And the third one is use the credentials of the current user. So the credentials of the current user will be used, and the same will be inherited to the data source, and the same credentials will be used to connect and get the data. And the fourth one is default. So if you select inherit here in the data source, and if you select default here, the default is nothing but the service account. So if you select default here and if you select inherit here, that is as good as selecting service account either here or here. So if you select service account and inherit here, what will happen? What will happen? It will use the service account, right? Or directly if you use the service account here, what will happen? It will use the service account. Or the third thing is, if you use inherit here and if you use default here, then what it will do is like, oops, let me take the pen. It will take this inherit and it will come to this default, and then from this default it will go to the service account, and it will take the service account to use in the data source impersonation mode. So this is about the impersonation. You have to be very careful. If you use inherit and default, that is as good as using the service account, or the best practice is to provide some Windows username and password which has access to the databases. So this is about the impersonation. For now you just ignore about this database level information impersonation. I just showed you to make it clear to you guys. And let me select the service account, by which the service will use the account that is used to start the services to connect to the SQL Server 2. Now click on next, and if you see, the output of what I have done so far is just a connection string. So the connection string, uh, the main purpose of the data source wizard, the wizard that you're seeing on my screen, is to set or create the connection string. Once the connection string is created, then if you click on finish, the data source will be created, and the name of the data source is AdventureWorks DW 2014, and you can give whatever you want. Okay, and if you're good in XML, then you can also use view code to see the XML structure of what you have done so far. So the ID of the data source is AdventureWorks DW, name is so and so, creator timestamp is so and so, last schema update is so and so, and the connection string, this is the connection string. So it should be in the same format. If you change anything or if you miss anything, like let's say I have taken out this source, then it will say something error in the data source XML. And if I close this and if I try to open this, I can't see that because there is some change, something wrong in the XML. So you have to be very careful when you work with XMLs. So better not to touch this stuff. Now if I save this, then I can see the data source here. If I double click it, I can see the data source. So this is how we can create data source, and there are a couple of options like sorting and exclude from project, blah blah blah. So we will see all these options, and we'll continue in the next session from where we start from this point. So that's it for today's session, and catch you in tomorrow's session.